You're still on your same outfits.
Yes.
What's the problem? Why?
They didn't give me any outfits.
They didn't give any outfits.
Heart failure, congestive heart failure is called. From the medication, you can tell.
So, ladies and gentlemen, today I bring a recap of Nnamdi Kanu's case from the beginning till date. So please pay attention and make sure you watch this video to the end. So, and as you're watching this video, drop your comment below, whatever you think. And don't forget to share it. Spread this good news because his health is at stake. Now, let's go there.
Nnamdi Kanu. Me being the first speaker, I'll briefly touch on the history of this case and I'll turn over the mic to my colleague here to take the other segment of this briefing. You will all recall that this case started in 2015, sometime in October, when Nnamdi Kanu was arrested in Lagos on his arrival from the United Kingdom. Then he was charged with 4 or 5 offenses, mostly bordering on treasonable felony. One was treasonable felony by itself, the other one was conspiracy to commit treasonable felony. There was also a charge that bordered on defamation of the then president and one that bordered on false declaration of an imported radio equipment. The case initially made its way to the magistrate court in Abuja, where in December 2016, the DSS, which had brought the case forward, filed a nolle prosequi. They filed an application before the magistrate court to discontinue his prosecution in the magistrate court on the premise that they were moving over to the High Court. And that was granted. Thereupon, the case moved over to the High Court, and it was in the High Court. And during that period, between 2016 and 2017, Nnamdi Kanu was granted bail twice. The order for bail was not complied with by the federal government. And one of the judges, Justice Adeniyi, who granted him bail unconditionally, became a casualty of the federal government. It's in the public domain. It was widely published then in accordance or quoting the judge himself, that part of the reason he was arrested subsequently and tried in court was because he had granted unconditional bail to Nnamdi Kanu. Anyway, in the very end, sometime in April of 2017, he was finally granted the latest bail then by Justice Binta Moritera-Nyako. That was the bail that he perfected and which the federal government obeyed. So he returned to his ancestral home in Umuahia, awaiting his next court date, which was in October of 2017. But lo and behold, between the 10th of October and 14th of October, the Nigerian army started or commenced lethal military invasion attacks at his ancestral home in Umuahia. Several people were killed. Nnamdi Kanu's parents were both alive, but they suffered injuries to which they later succumbed to and died 1 week apart. Nnamdi Kanu himself, in order to save his life, had to flee from the location, and fortunately for him, he found his way overseas and he remained in exile until June of 2021, when he was encountered in Kenya by Nigerian security agencies who have been on a manhunt for him. They laid ambush for him at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and they abducted him at the parking lot of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, where he had gone on a personal errand. From then, he was disappeared for 8 days at a secret location in Kenya, not a law enforcement location, facility. He was disappeared, and during those 8 days, he endured horrendous physical and mental torture. Eventually, on the 8th day, they brought him out from that location and secretly took him to the tarmac, straight to the tarmac, evading immigration. Kenyan immigration, put him on a private jet and renditioned him to Nigeria. He wasn't extradited. Most of these things are in the public domain. I'm doing this just to recap so that the public and the media in particular will be aware of how this case is now turning from prosecution to persecution. After he was brought into the country, the federal government, instead of pivoting on the charges for which Nnamdi Kanu was so unlawfully and forcibly brought into the country, totally abandoned those charges, all of them. But for one, the one that bordered on false declaration of an imported radio equipment. That's a very unserious charge. The more serious ones, bordering on treasonable offenses, were completely abandoned in place of new ones, 15 of them, bordering on terrorism. What this means is that for a whole 7 years, between 2015 and 2017, 2022, when these charges were finally amended to 15 and the old ones abandoned, the charges I will characterize as pre-rendition charges were completely abandoned. Nnamdi Kanu suffered at the hands of the criminal justice system in Nigeria for 7 whole years, between 2015 and 2022, for charges that were later abandoned. So for the 18 months he was detained, subsequent to his arrest in 2015, he was detained for nothing. He didn't deserve 1 day of that detention. He also didn't deserve any tribulation and travails that he had to go through for these 7 years, including the Python dance that nearly claimed his life, but claimed the life of his parents and other innocent people, including his exile abroad and including his rendition. So you may ask, why was he renditioned? For charges that were later to be abandoned. That's a question for that the answer will come 1 day sooner than later. Now, you all are aware of what happened in the High Court. The High Court, in response to objections filed against his trial, struck out 8 of the charges, leaving 7 in place, which went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal proceeded to strike all of the charges due to the extraordinary rendition which the Court of Appeal held had divested Nigerian courts of jurisdiction to try him. So he was discharged and was supposed to go home pursuant to that order of discharge. But the federal government did not obey that order. For a whole 2 weeks, he was looking for a way to dodge it, and finally he found a way by filing an application for stay of execution of the order. And the application was granted in a swift way that really would shock everybody in this country that knows that matters like that are often very much delayed in court. But I'll leave that aside. Eventually, the case proceeded to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court held that he must stand trial. In other words, the Supreme Court reversed the judgment of the Court of Appeal, but the Supreme Court also made other rulings that the revocation of his bail was wrong, the warrant of arrest upon which his rendition from Kenya was granted was wrong, that manifest terrorist organization. That offends Section 36 of the Constitution, which required that any law that derogates from the right of any Nigerian, his right to fair hearing, should have given him an opportunity to make representations. So these are the several violations. And unfortunately, these violations have led to incalculable damage to citizens of this country, to innocent people, mostly in the southeast and south-south. Hundreds have been killed in pursuit or in law enforcement actions related to fighting IPOB. It's wrong to do all that on a mere ex parte order. Thousands are languishing in detention, and of course, you know, Nnamdi Kanu himself is also languishing in detention following his rendition. So, too many bad things have happened, and we're hoping that we'll come full circle to a point where people will sit back, government officials, the federal government, led by President Ahmed Tinubu, to look again at this case and to see whether this case has any merit at all, or whether the case was, as it were, politically motivated to the point that the present administration should not have any business inheriting it. When someone says, I do not want to belong to a country anymore, we don't lock him, we don't pursue him with bullets and manacles and all kinds of things.